Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Amma ba'da, habati fillah, assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Continuing on in our brief reading of An-Nasiha, the advice to the youth of Ahl Sunnah by Shaykhina, Hafidhullah Ta'ala. We're talking about the 6th point with regards to the concept of hajr, of boycotting individuals. And the Shaykh, he mentioned several points, and I think it's worth going back over that so that way we can, in this whole sitting, we can finish that 6th point that he mentioned. So he said, the 6th point, it is appropriate for the one considering the issue of hajr to take into consideration the legislative guidelines which the Imams of Ahl Sunnah have mentioned regarding this particular issue. Those guidelines which, during the course of careful examination, will clarify in a precise manner who is to be boycotted and who is not, and from these guidelines. So here, the Sheikh, he introduces the guidelines. We talked about these guidelines yesterday, but I think we'll go over quickly to actually talk about it so it's in one sitting, the various, or some of the various important guidelines that are relevant when trying to implement this very serious mas'ala, the mas'ala of hajr. He said the first, pertaining to the hajr, the one applying the boycott. So this is the one, for example, if you are boycotting someone else, okay, and again, this is advice to Ahl Sunnah and the shabab that are tulab al-ilm and so forth. Generally, the general Muslims are not involved in this. They should not be really involved in making hajr in general, unless there is really, they have some knowledge and they feel that there's a harm by listening to an individual and interacting with an individual and so forth. So he says, pertaining to the hajr, the person who is implementing the boycott, it is recommended for him to be firm and effective to the extent that his hajr leads to the reprimand of he who is in opposition. So that means that you want an effective hajr. But if he is weak and impotent, then his hajr will not achieve the recommended objectives of boycotting, even if it is done with the correct intention. But if the boycott is considered in light of benefiting the hajr himself, in that he fears sitting or associating with this individual will affect his deen, in this case he has the right to boycott. Respectively, boycotting is legislated for the benefit of the one applying it. He has a right to boycott anyone whom he feels that by accompanying or associating with them will be detrimental to his religion, because again, it's about protecting your deen. It is also legislated for the benefit of the one being boycotted if it will bring about his reformation or rectification. Boycotting is also legislated for the benefit of the ummah, and that they abandon some of those who oppose the kitab and the sunnah and the methodology of the Salafee-Jihaadee in order to avoid and abstain from actions similar to theirs. There are textual evidences and proofs to substantiate every point mentioned here. So very, very important to know and understand that these are various times when it's mashru', legislated to make hajr and to abandon someone. Second, he says pertaining to the mahjur, this is pertaining to the person who is that you're making hajr of. Say, for example, these reasons are pertinent to the one that you are boycotting, meaning it has to do around them. So the Sheikh, he says, boycotting him is admissible, it's permissible, if it is anticipated that he will be affected by it and eventually return to the haqq. But if he doesn't benefit from it, then it could push him further away and increase him in his rebellion, at which point it is not recommended legislatively to boycott him. This is due to the fact that some people have a natural disposition of stubbornness, meaning the hajr doesn't affect them, rebellion, and a lack of humbling themselves to the truth, even if this will cause his eventual destruction. The likes of this one will not benefit from the discipline of boycotting. Rather, it is possible that he would benefit more from leniency. Perhaps a lot of those who don't benefit from being boycotted is due to some external affairs, like the fact that he is wealthy or someone of status in leadership. Generally, these types of people do not benefit from hajr because they deem themselves to be self-sufficient from the one who is applying the boycott initially. And as a result of this, the Prophet ﷺ used to apply leniency to the leaders who were followed and obeyed by their subjects. And the people of status like Abu Sufyan, Uyayna ibn Husn, and Al-Aqra ibn Habis. Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah states, and because of this, the Prophet ﷺ used to use leniency and gentleness with some people and boycott others. Like the three who remained behind from the Battle of Tabuk, they were better by far than those whom the Prophet ﷺ used to be gentle with to bring their hearts closer to Islam, due to the fact that they were the leaders and the most prestigious amongst the people. So again, this shows us that taking into consideration the status and position of the person you're making hajar of, there is relevancy. And, we know this even from intellectual discourse, from the aql, from the intellect. If you contemplate that, the fact is, for example, let's give an example that's not necessarily related to the deen, but for example, you see something from your principal of the school, and you are a student, you're a high school student. Now, you could try to rectify that principle. You could try to send a message or make a formal complaint or something to have that principal acknowledge that they're making some mistake in their administration or whatever. Or just think, if you were to think that you could take things into your own hand and you could discipline the principal, well, you can't. Or that you're able to boycott the principal and stop speaking to him. No, that's going to get you kicked out of school. So the point is you don't have the quwwah, you don't have the ability, you don't have the strength, you don't have the status with the principal. He's on a higher level and you're just a student. He was a student at one time, and then he was a student several other times after that in order to get the position of being a principal. He was not just a principal. He was not just a student in high school. He probably has a master's, possibly almost a PhD, or he has a master's and then maybe he has a teaching accreditation and he has administration accreditation. So he's well educated. His status as far as education and life experience and age is much higher than you as a high school student. You can't reprimand him. And so likewise with hajar, when we're talking about the deen, as Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah mentioned, is that sometimes the people have high status, so it is not beneficial and mashru' under those circumstances to make hajar of them because you will have no effect. And that goes against the whole point of trying to make hajar, is that you have an effect, or that at least you're protecting your own religion. Or it could be a punishment for the mukhalif, no doubt. Third, pertaining to the type of infringement which necessitates hajar, there is no act of disobedience or opposition in Islam that it is safe to say absolutely that anyone who does it deserves to be boycotted, or that he doesn't deserve to be boycotted. Just as some believe that they should boycott every innovation and not the acts of disobedience to Allah, or they boycott the bid'ah mukaffara without boycotting the other types of bid'ah, or they boycott the major sins instead of the minor sins. So some people, they make these conditions. The Sheikh is saying, no, it's legislated whenever there's a Sharia-based maqsad in intent and benefit. Hajar is legislated for every type of opposition, every act of disobedience, whether major or minor, as long as it is expected that the one being boycotted will benefit from it. So the determining factor in this issue is centered around the benefit of the one being boycotted and the lack thereof, without looking at the degree or grade of opposition or infraction. Based upon this, a virtuous man can be boycotted due to a minor infringement of the Sunnah, just as the Prophet ﷺ boycotted some of his companions radiallahu ta'ala ajma'in due to some minor infractions. For example, he did not return the greeting of salam to Ammar bin Yasir radiallahu ta'ala because he was wearing yellow, and he boycotted the one who built a dome until he knocked it down. At the same token, hajar could be avoided in relation to some major infractions performed by those who are less virtuous than those who were boycotted. From the Sahaba, radiallahu ta'ala ajma'in. An example of this is found in how the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam was lenient and gentle with Al-Aqra bin Habis and Uyayna ibn Husn. Rather, he was even lenient with some of the munafiqun, the hypocrites, like Abdullah ibn Ubay and his likes. All of this is viewed in light of the benefit that will result from boycotting and the lack thereof, along with careful consideration of the other guidelines pertinent to the issue of boycotting. So this is very important with regards to this issue, to know that it's not a black and white issue. Know that sometimes it's mashru' and sometimes it's ghayr mashru'. And, you know, the Sheikh is attempting to give you some of those dawabit, some of those criterion for when it's legislated and when it isn't. Then he moves on to the fourth point with regards to making hajr. Maybe you could say the fourth consideration. He says, pertaining to the time and place which the infraction was committed. We distinguish between the times and places where the infractions in opposition to the Kitab and the Sunnah and the methodology of Salaf are abundant and prevalent, and those who indulge in evil therein are the majority, and those times and places where the infractions are few, and those who indulge in them are weak and a minority. So if dominance in a particular time and place is for Ahl Sunnah, then hajr is admissible, it's permissible, along with careful consideration of the other outlying principles and guidelines detailed therein. And these are some of the other details we just mentioned. This is due to the dominance of Ahl Sunnah and the weakness and frailty of those in opposition. Therefore, the reprimand is more effective. Allah said about Ka'b ibn Malik and his companions, radiyallahu ta'ala anhum, until the earth, as vast as it is, became restricted for them, as did their own selves. And they realized that there is no fleeing from Allah and no refuge from him except with him. Just as the reprimand and the chastisement was more effective when Umar radiallahu ta'ala and the rest of the Ummah boycotted Zubayr ibn Asl. However, even the people of evil and falsehood are superior and dominant in a particular place and time. Meaning, even if the people, however, if the people of evil and falsehood are superior and dominant, meaning that they have high status and they have large numbers, okay, in a particular time or place. For example, you live in a place, a village, or a city where Ahl Bid'ah is kathir, they're majority by far, and Ahl Sunnah is qalil, which is the case in many places around the world, in fact. So he said, then boycotting is neither admissible nor legislated, except under specific circumstances. So again, it's fiqh fi din. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Man yuridillahu bihi khayran yafaqqahu fi din." Whenever Allah wants good for a person, he gives them understanding of the deen. And so it takes understanding to know when and how to apply these principles, and where to apply these principles. This is because the objective of hajr, which is reprimand and censor, cannot be achieved in this type of situation. Rather, the people of the truth may be harmed if they attempt to do so. Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah said. So as a result of this, those places where innovation is very prevalent, like how speaking excessively about the Qadr, the divine decree, was prevalent in Basra, and Tanjim was prevalent in Khurasan, and Tushayyu was prevalent in Kufa. These places should be distinguished from those places where it is not prevalent. Also, a distinction should be made between those leaders of high status who are obeyed by their subjects and other than them. Once these legislative objectives are acknowledged and understood, then one will traverse the path which will be more effective and more likely enable him to reach these goals. So again, look at this. Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah is letting us know that there's objectives, there's goals behind hajr. It's not a personal thing. It's not to harm someone, harm their honor, or to look good with your friends and look good and get praise from people because you're stern with someone else. That none of those things are the objective. The objective is to come closer to Allah and censor the mukhalif or the other objectives as we mentioned. So it's very, very important for us to consider those things and make sure we're practicing this major issue in a way that is mashru'. It's legislated. Now, the fifth, so the Sheikh mentions the fifth principle pertaining to Hajr. He says pertaining to the duration of Hajr, very important, pertaining to the duration of Hajr. How long should you make Hajr? He says, is it appropriate that the Hajr be commensurate and befitting the state of everyone being boycotted, depending on the type and degree of his infraction or the level of his opposition? For indeed from the people are those who will accept the reprimand and refrain if he is boycotted for 1 day or 2 days or a month or two. And from them are those who will stop and then continue. But if the objective of Hajr is achieved, then it's mandatory to stop. And if not, then there will be despair and hopelessness on the part of the one being boycotted, and he will not benefit. So here, the Sheikh is mentioning the point that sometimes you can go overboard with Hajr. So for example, if you see a person who's been boycotted or something like this, and you see that they return to the Sunnah, you see that they're trying to practice and they're trying to rectify their affair, their serious mukhalafat, meaning mukhalafat shari'i, things in which they disagree from the Sharia, or they may make mistakes or bid'ah in opposition to the Sharia, not in opposition to your opinions. That is something that's very important to distinguish. The difference between a mukhalif, someone who is a mukhalif regarding the shar', or a mukhalif who just has a difference with you. And they may be on the truth, you may be wrong. Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala said, while mentioning some of the benefits extracting from the fact that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam boycotted Ka'b ibn Malik and his 2 companions, he says, in this evidence that if the Imam, the Alim, the one who is obeyed by his followers, boycotts the one who deserves to be boycotted, that this becomes a cure for him, as long as he doesn't increase the dosage, nor is he excessive in the volume and the method in which he uses to treat him, in order not to kill him. For the objective of Hajr is reprimand and education, not to chase him away. Very important. I think that was a powerful statement by Shaykh al-Islam Ibn al-Qayyim to let us know that the objective is not to destroy people. And this is one of the things that we see a lot from some of the du'at and some of the people who unfortunately involve themselves in these kind of affairs. It's as if they seek to destroy people. They don't seek to rectify they don't care if someone who is on the Sunnah or has been calling to the Sunnah and they make a mistake. They don't seem to care about the rectification of those individuals. Some of the people want to destroy them. Some of the people want to see those people humiliated. And this is a non-Sharia based objective. Rather, you should want guidance even for Ahl Bid'ah, because they're Muslim. If they're Muslim, they're Muslim. Okay? You want guidance for them. Even the people of desires. Yes, it may be a punishment. Yes, you may, for whatever reasons, maybe things have gotten to where you have cursed them or something like this. And at times that can be mashru'. At times it can be mashru'. But we're not going to talk and go into the depth about those in-depth masail like that. But it's similar to the issue of takfir. However, the point is that you should want guidance for others in general. You should want guidance for others, and you should not give them, as Shaykh al-Islam Ibn al-Qayyim mentions, so much dosage of Hajr, of boycotting them, that you've now destroyed them, made them leave the deen, or totally abandon the Sunnah and go to the people of Bid'ah, or whatever the case may be. And we've seen this countless times in the West and really around the world. In fact, we can honestly say around the world that many people, if they had been treated, especially from amongst the students of knowledge and even some mashayikh, if the people had treated them better, even some other mashayikh and stuff, and had really tried to rectify things and come with the gentle mawqif, then perhaps, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, we would have better results and better results with the da'wah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because there wouldn't have been so many people who have been destroyed in their honor and caused so much splitting amongst countless communities and even families regarding some of these masail and some of these issues. And I think we will stop there. We reached the 7th point, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Almighty, to accept our good and forgive our evil. Hopefully we'll be able to finish this treatise before I leave and travel, but there's a possibility we may not, because it's still a couple more pages and I'm going to be busy. But perhaps if I have a chance, maybe even later, I'll go through another dars if we can, have another sitting. وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. And if there are any questions, we will answer them, especially pertinent to the topic. Unfortunately, it seems that most of the people, when I do a book or something, they're not really interested in those topics, and you see it in the questions. There's very rarely questions pertinent to the topic. It's unfortunate. It is what it is, but I hope that the people raise themselves up with ilm and find wherever they take their knowledge from that they do benefit, because we want to see more students of knowledge and more people learning their deen and practicing and implementing and learning from the ulama, not less. Now, Now, since there's no questions, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Almighty, to accept our good and forgive our evil, protect us from kulli su wa makruh. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.